Hello everybody and welcome back, where today we're talking PSVR2 news. There are a couple of stories here that a few weeks ago cropped up and I wanted to make some updates on them, as recently we have got new information, including one game which we thought might get PSVR2 support, but unfortunately it seems like that's not happening. Before we get into this, only 25% of you are actually subbed to the channel, and a lot of you do watch and then leave, so if you feel like subbing to the channel, then it's completely free to do so, and I would really appreciate it. And thank you to our patrons and members, who are all on screen right now. I could not do this without them. Right. Let's jump in with our first story, which is quite a disappointing one, I must add, so let's get the disappointment out of the way, shall we? This is pertaining to Project Motor Racing. Now, this is what I would call kind of the sequel to Project Cars 2. I know there is an actual Project Cars 3, but in my opinion, that game was pretty awful. But Project Motor Racing seems to be the proper sequel to Project Cars 2, with a full career, with actions that truly matter. So if you bin your car, then your funding's gone and you're probably not going to get too much of a career out of that. It's also got some online racing as well, although that isn't really the main component here, as they're not really wanting to try and rival games like iRacing. But the main thing here is that virtual reality support was kind of a big point in their last article, talking about how they want to bring it over to PCVR and potentially PSVR2. Now, as far as we can tell, PCVR is still on the cards. Now, this is kind of a tale as old as time with Ian Bell projects, I must say, but this is kind of a reasonable kind of development in this space. But essentially, there have been games before where certain elements were promised but not quite delivered, or not delivered on time, basically, and it seems like VR is going to be one of those. For PCVR, it seems like it'll maybe come day one. They're trying their best, but the physics of the actual game seem to be the main concern and priority, which is fair enough. But for PSVR 2, they're now saying that it is unlikely. PlayStation VR2 support on PS5, as opposed to the PC adapter, is not on the slate currently. A quote by Traxion, which is a website which has kind of covered this. I'd love for us to do it, but I have to be realistic with the timescales right now and what's out there on the market. That's not a hard no, but if we can't deliver something that's knockout, we're not going to deliver it, because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. Well, they kind of got our hopes up with their last statement, not even a month ago, I want to say, talking about how Project Motor Racing could get PSVR 2 support, but now they are backtracking on that, unfortunately. Maybe that earlier statement a couple months ago was them kind of dipping their feet in and seeing if anybody would come and fund their port. Maybe Sony would come and help. I sure would love Sony to come and give them a bucket load of money to port this over to PSVR 2, because I'd love more racing games. As much as I do love Gran Turismo, and honestly, if GT7 was the only game on PSVR 2, I'd still be using my headset pretty much every day for it. I would love some other options in the sim racing space. I mean, I'll jump into Assetto Corsa, I'll go onto the F1 games sometimes, even though they're a bit of a mess nowadays, and I will probably try out Project Motor Racing, but in the flat, it just isn't as immersive as in virtual reality, you gotta admit. So unfortunately, seems like that's not really on the cards right now. We'll see how the PCVR implementation is, though. A lot of the stories of these games is that they come out on PCVR and they don't really run that well. So if that's the case here and they haven't really optimized it for PCVR, which again is very common, then maybe we've dodged a bit of a bullet there. But maybe once they've cleaned it up in the future, we could get a port. But it just depends on funding and timing and all these things. So unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be on the cards right now. I wish it was, but that's the way this has gone. Now, in our last proper PSVR2 news video, I mentioned that Reach was getting a release date later on that day, and it is coming October 16th, which is quite nice. I feel like if Aces of Thunder does come out September 2nd, we've got something in September to really boost us along and tide us over. And then as soon as October hits, midway through that month, we're getting Reach. And then I'm assuming before the end of the year, I don't know when, we're going to, of course, get Thief VR, which is going to be really, really cool to see. So these games are making a great lineup for PSVR 2 at the end of this year. A little bit like last year, we had Alien Rogue Incursion, Metro, Behemoth, kind of to round us off in the year. Our triple header this year seems to be Aces of Thunder, Reach, and Thief, which I would say is also a great lineup to have. But yes, October 16th is the date, so save it, and you can go and pre-order it if you want. Now, some of you may remember me talking about a game called The Obsessive Shadow a little while ago. It's by an indie solo dev, and it's a horror game where I believe your house is kind of being stalked, and you've got to avoid whatever is trying to get inside and get at you. And the dev hopped in on the Without Parole Discord to talk about it a little bit further and talk about the demo coming soon in October, or at least it's planned to be on October. So they say, firstly, a demo is coming soon for Chapter 2. They said this at first, but then they also reiterated that Chapter 1 will be getting a demo just before that as well, so you'll be able to try out both if you'd like. So this is a super dark and creepy one that I can't wait for you all to see. As a little apology to making the PSVR 2 people wait so long on the PSVR 2 port of the original game, along with the delay I talked about recently, I've decided to put the PlayStation Store page up for Chapter 2 demo, which should hopefully be releasing this October. Right now though, you guys can go and wishlist it. The hope is to have out on MetaQuest, Steam, and PSVR 2 all at once, or at least close together, but that's to be decided right now. Quest and Steam will most likely be out at the same time, but the to be decided part is mostly referring to PSVR2. They also mentioned that a couple of tracks by the Five Nights at Freddy's composer Leon Riskin are coming to the game in October, so they can't say just yet, but that's quite exciting. But yeah, essentially we should be getting at least one demo or two demos of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 for the Obsessive Shadow. We've seen demos work quite well for games in the past. I mean, Of Lies and Rain literally just came out with one, and a load of people love that. I myself ran into a couple of pretty severe bugs in that game, but I still really did enjoy the experience, so that's got me hyped for the full release. So hopefully it's a similar story for the Obsessive Shadow, and we can get a little bit of an insight on what the game will be like to get everybody excited. Now, I talked about Resident Evil 9 in the last news video that we did as well, but thing is, we've got some more information since then. In that video, we talked about how the trailer came out, which was a gameplay trailer, but really had about 3 seconds of gameplay in it. But it showed a lot of stuff that really incites some confidence that it could be PSVR2 compatible. First and third person, both choices there. First person would work great in VR. You had the little lighter that Grace was carrying around. And overall, everything looked PSVR2 compatible. Now, a lot of the reactions have come out of Gamescom as well, where people have been playing the game saying that it's absolutely terrifying. We've got that big, horrendous, scary creature that follows Grace around that looks horrible, and I would probably cry in VR playing against that. But the main piece of information I want to focus on here is by Dusk, who, if you recognize that name, has had a bit of a spotty history in the past about Resident Evil leaks, but recently has been kind of on the money, and clearly their sources are within something reliable in terms of Capcom, basically. And somebody asked them on Twitter about PSVR2, which was at directed by Alex G. They said, "Hi Dusk, I know I asked this a lot, but I'm curious, does Capcom plan to utilize the PSVR2 in the future game? I feel like it makes the franchise stand out more having the additional open and lets them be ahead of the immersive experience." And Dusk replies with what we kind of all assumed, but with a bit more detail in there, saying, "That's up to Sony, really. Capcom doesn't do VR on its own because there's no money in it for them. Its impact on sales is very minor, but if Sony pays them enough, they'll do it. But it's in Sony's hands. But Capcom and Sony do have a good relationship, so that's worth mentioning." This is kind of what we all assumed, but with a bit of kind of hopefulness at the end of it. I mean, I feel like a PSVR2 port may have been mentioned behind the scenes, and maybe Dusk would have heard about that if it was happening. But also, again, they haven't been the most accurate in the past, but recently have been pretty good. But there's no mention about Sony losing the marketing rights for Resident Evil there, which is promising, because the main piece of evidence that people bring up for Sony not funding a PSVR2 port is the fact that they don't have the marketing rights, apparently, for Resident Evil 9. So if that's not being mentioned here, then that kind of gives me a bit more hope and confidence that Sony still could fund a PSVR2 mode. And the Resident Evil devs have said it is their preferred way to play in terms of immersion, and they'd love to do it in the future. Same with the Ace Combat devs. They've also been talking about how they want to incorporate VR in the future, so hopefully they do. I would see it maybe being announced at next month's State of Play or Showcase if it does. But yeah, there is some more information from Dusk kind of confirming what we already knew, but also giving us a little bit more insight into the fact that Sony and Capcom still are on very good terms. Penultimately, Into Black is releasing fairly soon. I will have some coverage out before the game launches, I believe, and I should have a main review and then some co-op gameplay for you, so you can see what the cooperative stuff is like with a couple of friends. I jumped in with Reese from Games with T, Alex from the Mimic's Veil, and Hippie Pickle to test out the game, so you'll have 2 videos going live there. But I know a lot of you are excited for this one. From what we know, the port should be shaping up to be pretty damn good in terms of visual fidelity and features, so we'll have to see how that lands, but you shouldn't be waiting too long for some insight into Black on PSVR2. While I was browsing the PS Store, I saw a new PSVR2 game pop up, and I've got to say, avoid this one at all costs. It's called Urban Hit VR. It's a demo for a game that looks more like kind of AI shovelware. The actual image here seems to be a real asset, but yeah, there's not really any sort of information on what the game really is. And Kisnell from the Without Parole Discord also found the description here that I missed while I was looking on the store, which has about 1 million emojis, probably either from something that's been translated and then these have been added in, or it's just AI generated. So I would say steer clear of whatever this is. I'm not really sure what it is entirely, but yeah, don't get your hopes up for whatever has just appeared on the store. But I always try and let you know of potential shovelware that shows up, just so you don't spend your hard-earned money on it, even if it is a demo. Just don't even download it. Not worth your time. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know if you're disappointed about Project Motor Racing, although we still have the potential of Assetto Corsa Evo coming to PSVR2 in the future, so we'll have to wait and see about that one. And it's not completely off the table for Project Motor Racing either in the long term, so again, we'll have to see. Right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.